Sean Rajaputra, your host for today's webinar on SAP Hybris content and data propagation. Thank you everyone for joining our webinar today. Today's speaker for our webinar is Ravi Paul. Ravi is an expert level technology guy having leadership and designing experience in developing customer engagement solutions that involves building B2C, B2B, omni-channel and digital experience on SAP Hybris exclusively. Ravi, back to you.
Thank you, Sean. And good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on SAP Hybris series. And the focus of today's webinar is going to be providing you in-depth understanding of essential elements of Hybris and data and content known as Hybris catalog in a broader term. So let me just get started. Briefly, I am involved into SAP Hybris digital experience implementation for designing different customer solutions on B2C and B2B channel. My brief introduction, and if you would like to contact me after this webinar for any questions, this is my email address, rtal@prosoftgroup.com.
Yeah, just a minute, Ravi. All the audience, we request you to, reserve your questions towards the end. We have a Q&A session, and you can type your questions at any point of time on the questions tab, and I will answer that towards the end. Go ahead, Ravi. Thank you.
So in today's webinar, we are going to emphasize on what's data, what is content, and how during the proper Hybris build between the environment, how does it get propagated. As I started looking into data content propagation, I saw that there are many aspects of the questions and some of the things which pop up during the deliberation of the team meetings are very widely in terms of development, environment planning, testing planning, staging planning, production planning. So there are many questions, so I would like to list out those questions. Even though I see that in today's webinar, I will be pretty much focused and will keep the focus on data and content. And in the later series of our webinars, I would like to cover some of the other aspects to have a total perspective on the context of the problem which we want to solve. So as I have heard and been in discussions with many enterprise level customers, there is always a desire and yearning among those enterprises that how I should be setting up my agile development environment. How do I will have an environment by which I can effectively test and have a bug tracking environment. How do I structure and govern my content and data in a scalable environment? How will I develop an instant strategy? This is more like when the companies are getting ready to launch their omni-channel B2C and B2B. This becomes an important aspect of being successful is that, how their instances of Hybris, as there are many different components, as you will see in this webinar, which should be taken into consideration. So we will be talking about some of those. And then as we are trying to structure that some of these content and data, they would like to see that, how does it fit into their overall enterprise strategy? And with all these options, what are the recommended options? What are the best practices an organization should adopt to? And what level of training, what level of their kind of management part of it, like change management, what are some of the things which they should adopt to be successful. So as I said, in today's webinar, we will be focusing more on very critical aspect of having understanding of the data, content, and the propagation, but these are some of the things which probably one more webinar, maybe one, maybe two, where I would like to take the concept of this into that how the different environments they actually see the data and content, and how we can effectively give organizations by view of SAP Hybris tools and software development practices, as well as some of the things which are part of the engineering model to get it done. So let's move on. So I will just set up the discussion and today's webinar with understanding of what does it mean as data and content in context of Hybris, and how does, from the business perspective, we see it. So when we are in discussion with the team of the business focused stakeholders, for them it's all about product, product catalog. It's about categories. It's about pricing. It's about how to have a uniform view across their global catalog if they are operating in different demographics. And another part is like where they see that any incoming and any association with their customers base, how they can manage separately, that part, or may integrate in any of the CRMs. And the third part is all about, even though here is web content, but it's more like branding. It is very critical for organizations that, how do they represent themselves in an omni-channel environment, where there is a diversity in the demographics, so that at least they can engage with the customer in a manner by which customer can understand their brand. This is more if comes in an aspect of whether it's a mobility or it's a desktop application or it is a web application or it is anything on any size of any mobile environment, and how this particular content can be rendered in specific to demographic needs in a fashion which is more responsive. So encapsulating this into the Hybris context, Hybris provides the ability by which a product and a catalog can be captured, so that this data, which is more structured around any of the need of defining a catalog in a very extensible manner, that is supported by Hybris type systems, which allows a similar concept of object orientation, where, if suppose I am having a product now, I would like to extend a product because what I find during my business requirements that there is some additional attributes which my product should carry. So I can extend the out of the box or something which I have already described, and I want to launch a different stream of products, and I can do that by extending it in a fashion the way we do inheritance within object-oriented. The same thing into the data model supported by the type system is provided by a Hybris to support that feature. So second point here I am mentioning is as we see that every company, they desire to go across their brand through any omni-channel manner, they would like to keep it in an intact fashion, so that across the demographics that can be represented so that the customer can understand it. So this provides a framework by which we can have multiple international languages, we can have multiple formats of whether dates or anything which is more suitable for that particular demographic. So it also provides a sort of, I will call more of a digital factory, where I see a cockpit where a cockpit can be given to a creative team, and those creative teams, as they are creating their digital content, they are actually bringing their digital content into this container, and then, by virtue of a templating, they are actually positioning those content wherever they would like to see to represent a brand. And at the same time, the whole team, wherever they are, they can participate into this engagement exercise by which they can see how this is eventually going to be launched in any particular environment. So having said that, so what does it mean is that in one framework, one single stack, where Hybris is providing not just the ability by which a master data can be maintained, it also is providing the ability by which the content can be supported to support a particular brand of the business too. So this is very important, so that we tend to see that what its ability is in terms of supporting the data and the content. And I would like to mention one more point is that it is not a enterprise content management system, where their need is more like to capture the content and then to scan the content and then store the content. So that's more like how the document management system, they do it. This is very specific to your B2C and B2B or any commerce in a customer engagement relationship solutions where all the attributes within the commerce concept, that brings into the picture. So with that, let's get into more and see that how do we see this into the digital aspect of this particular product, web content management, and customers, and how does that, what does it mean to us? So as any catalog management is all about, catalog, the different versions, the product and the categories, different media management. So this is all about in the concept of that. So I will now touch on the web content management, where you are creating templates, pages, content slots, managing the site. You are having some kind of workflow in the whole aspect. You are trying to brand it in different demographics. We are publishing it. We are putting some kind of a search engine optimization routines into that. So all those kind of things. And some of the features which are not supported in terms of there are digital asset management tools, which can be put on top of it, so that because this whole repository is there, and if there is anything in terms of metadata management or transcoding or some kind of reformatting of the particular content, that can be done through some of the external tools as well. Even though it provides some basic level of the digital asset management, but when it comes down to purely when you start to see a DAM tool, that's more of we can see it from an external party. So social integration is more like where how this content can be rendered across, whether we have Facebook presence, whether we have Twitter or we have any other blogging site, how does it manage into that. So keep that in mind as we started the discussion into the data content and the web content, so that we start seeing as we learn more into getting into those environments, that how does this mean to us, and in the SAP Hybris context, how this whole solution is put into place. So let's see now some of the stages of a software development stages, and see the elements in terms of that in all the aspects of data and content. What are the other things which need to be considered as we start seeing moving from a development to a production environment. So as I said, that we have to see from the aspect of a data and content, which is web content, media, and the product and book catalog. when we move from development all the way to production, uh, from the concept of data, content, indexes, code, and systems, every stage of the development, every environment represent this in a very different way. What does it mean to say is that in the development environment, I more care about, so my developers, they are having some testing data so that they can unit test their code. There is some kind of there is out of the box catalog, which some apparel catalog, there is a power tool, there is electronics, and there is also some other things which probably, I can create so that my developers can go on. And at the same time, the need is more like, they can check their modules, they can actually check the code, they can test their code, and they can verify, everything is working fine. So as we move from the development to the testing, the need for more from the unit to integration testing, that pop up. This is more like now we are having module testing, where we would like to test, end-to-end business process. So the need for now the data and the content and the web content that emerges, that means it's more like the complexity is going higher. The QA is the same, it goes higher, staging, production. So as you go from left to right, what we see here is that we are having an environment which is operating in development, which is much easier to manage, as this more is geared toward the as a developer, who is working on that, and all the way to production, where we cannot afford in terms of to have a environment which is not scalable. We should be able to operate when it comes down to staging and production, so that we should be able to change any of our promotion. We should be able to change some of the content of the website, in a very live environment. We should be able to test that, how that is going to look like, before it goes into production. So seeing in the context of this, what are the things which goes from development to production? As there are application files, there are some configuration, there are server configuration, there are system configurations, there are dependent libraries, there are some database object and configuration, there is a media configuration, search configuration, security, and other dependencies. So there are many aspects, which are part of this moving from one environment to another as we see it. And as this, as the process of building each and every release, and then making sure that the content, data, and indexes, code, and system, they are all intact. This requires rigorous practices and best practices, and making sure that all the aspects of this is taken into consideration. So what does it mean from this definition of all these environments into that, how a particular instance, that looks like, so that, I can see that instance moving from development all the way to production, and see that, if I should be able to, that how it is going to impact my strategy in terms of finding out that, how much volume I am going to support, and do I have to keep my operations up and running 24/7, how much I can afford, 99, what is my high availability requirements are, what is my disaster recovery requirements are, so all those kind of things. So moving from our understanding that we have to operate in those environments, each environment is going to have, which is a central part of that environment is a Hybris instance. So as we were talking, Hybris instance is composed of data, and it's composed of content. Then this data and content need to be indexed, so all of those interfaces. And then, it has a application code, that where all of the out-of-the-box system services Hybris, the business services Hybris, and some of our own accelerators changes, which we write, this is part of the code. So if we go underneath, data is all supported by any database server. It can be relational, it can be any other non-relational database. And the content in the same fashion is more supported into the media server. And then indexes are supported on Solar Server. And as we see our code in the runtime, this code is running in the context of a application server, in this case the Tomcat. And when it is in the development mode, we are managing the code, all the teams within the JIT environment, where this is collaborative, where they are ensuring that, during the code development. This is all sitting on top of virtual forms. There can be one development form, another can be database form. So I have given a view which is more logical, but as we drill down into some of the aspects, we can see even that how the infrastructure is going to like. Then sitting on top of this, underneath the layer is a physical server, where those physical servers are, because we can be having maybe on one single server running multiple instances of VM, and within each VM, we are running these Hybris instances. So this is very important as we see that how our data content that needs to be moved from one instance to another instance, and within the context of the Hybris, as it is called a catalog, and the catalog has two views. One is the data view, another is a content view. So data view is all about a product catalog, where all the features of the product, and another is all the feature of the web content for the branding purposes and all that. So with this, let's look into, but keep in mind that we have those different stages of environments, from development all the way to production. So I know it's much, most of the people, those who gear with the development testing and QA is something which is manageable. When it comes down to more like staging and production, there where the complexities arises. It arises substantially because there is more SLAs, there is more KPIs. All those things makes more to meet the demand of the stakeholders. So with that in mind, so what we need to see is just a high-level view of a runtime data flow when something is in production. This is what is my B2C and B2B site, and where all the things I am actually taking into account, when it moves. Within a SAP, within a B2B, B2C site, there is all about the content is managed, the data is managed, and then, we go across different, whether through internet or having established direct connection, so that, whether it's taxes or fraud check, Google Maps, Bizarre, all of those things, they become a part of a system to take into consideration, so that when we start looking into the data, we have to, and the content, because a lot of this data and content is shared across these constituents for this any successful B2C or B2B site. So, as I said, our critical view is important in terms of that how does an architectural view of this emerges for us to have a better understanding that how I am going to see my staging and production going into that. So this is a conceptual architecture view where if I so let me start with the production Hybris commerce. So a sample company ABC.com. So this is a Hybris instance in production is running, and then it works in conjunction with a staging environment, and they all have the running into the Solar cluster, which is running in its own maybe form, or it is on the way I was explaining those virtual forms. And the same is the staging, and then there are many different roles which are working on this. Like, if there is a creative person who is working with this particular staging site, that is creating the content, and then eventually, that content, moving here through by means of import and export, which I will explain in the next slide. But overall, the important part is that we see that how it is being so with these two boxes, which are the representation of our staging and our production servers. What we see here is that the organization, the bigger organization, which are more like across the globe, they have a concept of a global catalog where they would like to have their same definition coming through one particular instance where anyone from the concept of their data and content should be one single place, so that anything which needs to be provisioned that's across the organization is a decision in terms of how my product should look like, how my branding should look like, so that this master catalog, which we call it, this master catalog then can get into any of the multiple websites, or maybe based on the regional concepts of continents, so they can be dispersed so that the data is exported and then the data is moving to those different instances of Hybris. So there are many means, so here I am showing here using a data hub capability by which, I can move some of these, global catalog content onto this. My creative team is working on this particular thing so that if there is anything specific need to be managed, on that website, which is if I'm launching a website for US versus India versus China, and so in different languages, so this particular creative person can work on those parts and move the things across. And so from backend integration, anything that how I view and how do I see that, where my master data are my, system of records. So any ERP system, whether it is a SAP or it's a non-SAP system, it depends. Sometimes some organization, by virtue of SAP, a hybrid capability of having a more configurable product structuring and a catalog. Sometimes there is also a possibility by which they will have their product catalog data to be created from their front end systems, which is more like a hybrid side of it, and then eventually they will have on the SAP hybrid SAP side on the ECC or any of the ERP system. But most of the organization, their product development happens more at the manufacturing end of it, where the source of their SKUs, source of any of the product information, the basic is all about the ERP system, and then funnel back into the front end. And so from the MDM standpoint of view into the commerce system, where the outlook is more from the customer driven, so that the customer can easily see its choices made into the product, so that they can make proper searches, they can make more attributes are driven from the customer side of it. So when we take a look at this conceptual architecture, this is more of a representation of into the stages which we were talking about. into that development to the production, but this is more geared into that how an active runtime staging and the production is going to look like. So this is more like how the data, which is more like the product catalog, is moving across these different staging, and then from staging is how it is moving into the production with the proper authorization and workflow, so that the master data is maintained in what particular instance, and then eventually it gets dispersed into different instances of the B2C and B2C website. So now from here, let's move on to understand that how the media as well as the web content, how does that get looked upon? So this happens a lot from your product cockpit, where you can form the views, you can see all the data, and then you can from the business aspect of it, you can manage all the attributes of the product. So this is more geared from that side of it. So from content perspective, it is a bit, I will not say that it is a bit, difficult, but it's more like once the concepts appear, then it becomes much more easier to digest that, what is the purpose of that, as I have gone through now a number of slides where I have distinctly said that when we start looking into Hybris, this is very critical, that how do you view data versus the content, because content is all geared towards the branding side of it. So this one, as we manage the product data through product cockpit, so there is a web content management, so there is a WCMS cockpit where the creative teams sitting across, they can have their content structured and their content into a workflow manner. They can actually create pages, they can view pages, and so that they can actually see before they can run into production. So this is so critical. So let's spend some time, understanding that, as I said, there are two instances running here. One is the staging, instance, and here is our production instances. So in the staging instance, every catalog within Hybris have two versions. One is a staged version, another is an online version. So this is within a single database. Your data is represented into these two versions. So what does it mean is that any work in progress data or your content, that is staged within that, so that you do not see it. And it is more like, when you're working on your cockpit, you can say that, okay, I would like to temper the data more like into the staging as a best practice. And once you are happy with where you are looking into how everything is looking into that, you are going to eventually synchronize it. So when you are synchronizing it, so this is more like you are making your changes visible to the online version of that catalog. And so if you see here, the way we are representing here is that, any changes which are going into this separate environment on staging, how do we propagate that part of the content into the production? There is a bit of work, which takes place here. If one way is that, you can directly work onto the staging version within the production. But as you can see that, because most of the production systems, they are heavily bombarded, because they are more sensitive in terms of, so that, any of the volume and strategy is more like, that should be geared more from the production run, so that any incoming request from the customer. This is more like that. So it's not advised, but there are, if suppose you have a microsite, if suppose you are just testing it out. So sometimes it also happens that, one single production site, for some of the experimental products which you're launching, where there are not two separate environments. But as you see more like, you are having a 24/7 where the customers, where the orders are coming every second, and like there is a lot of volatility as well as, a lot of stress on the system, that's where, keeping a separate environment where any of your creative team, they do not working on the same instance as your online traffic is working on. So as the creative team is working on this staging environment, so they are actually, so there are routines by which, there are many ways, that you can actually go to Hybris activity control as well as any management console. And from there, you can run and export, and that export by virtue of, how do you have export scripts. And then there are also some of the other things which take into place, because if we look into the different types, it is compose type into the relationship type, and there are some collection types. So there are many types where there is some dependencies there. So there is so we have to make sure that, any of these scripts we are generating out of that, those scripts, they capture any of the changes we have done on a staging environment, so that, all of those, they get executed, and then that data actually put into those impact files. So they are more like files which is where you have more the data into CSV file, and another is like which gives you structure of that, how this data is being exported out of the staging. And as this is a staging, changes, because we are not going to have the online from here, and the staging is going to get into staging, so that we can actually look into the production into our not peak hours, and then we can synchronize on the production side. So more like we are dividing the work, so that the creative team, they make sure that everything happens in a staging, so that they have the full approval, authorization, validation, and data testing, everything before anything goes here. So what we have seen in some working with bigger clients is, as creative team, they start creating a lot of these components, like, as you can see, there are link component, there are paragraph component, there are image components, as they are creating it. So a lot of times they are creating more than what is required, and there are many content created which are never used. So it is very important that this on a periodic basis need to be profiled and need to be cleaned, so that it does not have so much content which is freely hanging without any use of it. So this is more like into governance and more like into the best practices adoption, those kind of things. So this takes so these two critical slides gives us the view. I will just re-emphasize, this slide. This one is more which give aspect of the data, where we see into a running, staging, and into production. How do we see it, and based on your particular environment, you may see, some of the changes. You maybe like, sometimes you may feel like, there is already something ESB is there, so there is not something data hub needs to be connected to ESB, or maybe like, you want to have customized view where your asynchronous and synchronous data pull and push into Hybris with your ERP. So this is more like, how, so this is more like a reference conceptual architecture which you can tailor according to your need. But this gives a very deep dive view into all the components, and all the workers, those who are contributing to this, all the data, what's essential into this part. And so this is about the content as I described. So all about nothing but a branding part of it for the omni-channel presence, where you would like to have all different multi-language, multi-formats you want to manage in a structured environment. So some of the later slides are very simple, so they are more like going from, how those stages and some of those things, they take place, just like as I was talking about, develop to test and integrate, test, QA, release, and deploy. Within different teams, how do they see in terms of a Hybris architecture as in Hybris, everything is so composed into a modular development that it is very critical that as you start understanding as you develop that how your environment is going to look like, how complex it's going to be, that is it just a microsite versus a enterprise business, you are going to have a multi-cluster, you may have a full cluster of your solar server, you will have full cluster of your Tomcat, where the Hybris is running, you will have maybe media server is not on your file system, but this is your Amazon S3 where you're putting everything into Amazon. So the different strategy within the configuration, when we do the development, you may keep the media into a local device so that, you can aggressively develop it, as you get into more like QA, you see that, that is more like moving from your local strategy media into something with Amazon or something custom you want to develop or anything, you can think of other parts. So this is critical so that we plan it out, we see that how we address and start seeing those two architectural slides which I showed, and then map out all of our environment in that capacity. So as we started, there were questions and some takeaways, as I said, because the topic of addressing all of those questions is quite big, and just composing everything into this 45 minutes to an hour discussion, I just cater more into the data and content, critical parts, so that as we move further into our subsequent webinars, where we will talk more like instance strategy into how to strategize it and how to handle that part. So from here, this is fonts are very small, pardon me for that, as this is very busy slide. So in this is more that how do we construct those releases, all of these dependencies, how they should be structured into a local development to our testing environment, to integration, to QA, to staging and production. And some of the things from the governance standpoint of view, how should we engage? So this gave a full view of all those activities so that you are more prepared into ensuring that checklist is prepared, so that we are ensuring that everything is pretty much as part of the build. Through automated build, there are some manual steps to ensure that everything is being planned properly. This one I have given in my architectural webinar earlier, but just wanted to throw it out so that sometime as we had this full discussion into our persistence and Hybris and the repository side of it, so that we do not lose the fight that eventually as we see this code and this implementation, what are the different things which are being part of it. So with that, let me just revisit one going back to slide number 1 where we started. So this pretty much completes our today's webinar as we started with that how we are going to have agile development, but this bold and part number 3, point number 3 was something which was today's discussion, so that you have more understanding into that what does it take. And with that, I would open up the floor for questions. Back to you, Sean.
Thanks, Ravi. Audience, now the floor is open for questions. Please type your questions on the questions tab, and we would be more than happy to address them. We'll take the first question. What is the purpose of a search cluster?
Sure, Sean. As I said, for any business critical, solar, which is Hybris, a search engine. So there are different instances of, solar instances are running within a cluster, so that there is high availability.
Okay. Can you throw some light on Hybris content catalog?
As I was describing that the catalog has two views within Hybris. One is purely from the standpoint of the PIM, where all the product-related information are captured. This is where Hybris see that the catalog view is a product view. Another is a content view. The content is all centric into web content management systems, where you are building different parts of your the web presence it's in a responsive fashion, where there are templates, there are pages, there are content slots, there are different components. So this is supported by CMS2 module within the Hybris, and it provides you the ability by which through cockpit you can have the whole team, your creative team, and they can collaborate using that tool to create these omni-channel sites.
Okay, sure. Thank you. Any thoughts of instance strategy?
So Sean, so I touched upon it today. It's more taking the audience into so that they develop understanding of staging and the conceptual architecture of staging and production, and then understand more like the data and the content. And so the instance strategy is more like that how many instances of Tomcat server are where my Hybris is running, then the solar servers, and how many media server installations I am going to address it in more deep into broader in my coming webinar. And but this is a topic which let me show you one slide where. So this is in the making, where because justifying the time so that the message go across more concretely. So I'm going to talk about more that how this whole thing will be structured, so that we can start seeing that, as I touched, that there is a virtual forms, then within the virtual forms underneath is the physical form, physical servers. So as we go into next, we are going to talk about based on the business requirements and the volume and the KPIs, that what is the best way to have those environments up and running.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Ravi. We'll take one more. Where would external tables and cross-referencing be included in this architecture, such as middleware or data that falls out of SAP or Hybris, but it's part of the integration?
This is, as external data, if I understand, the one which is more shared. Let's take a talk about from the concepts of, as I said, product and the content. Product data, a catalog which is more integrated, and the source of record, which is part of the ERP system. That's where once we have a principle that any product will first be created in our ERP system, and then it will be propagated into our Hybris. So there are, as I was showing, that there is through Data Hub or through other means by which, if you have a ESB or any other means by which you can have a direct a hot folder where you can take the feed out of those, and even from the external vendors, you may have a catalog for your suppliers, which are sending you the feed on a regular basis, and then you are inputting that feed either through Data Hub or through your validation process to get into the Hybris.
Thank you. We'll take one more. Are the cockpits equivalent to dashboard? What would be the difference?
No, I will not say it's a dashboard. Cockpit is more of a tool by which you actually interact with the underneath your data and the content. So it's not just a representation of any view or any status. So I see dashboard more like if I want to see more like so there are cockpits just like if I go on I want to see a back office, where I can see that, how many orders I have taken, what are the orders in pipeline. But there are cockpits, which are more geared into as a tool, just like a product cockpit is more where you engage with your product catalog to create products, update products, synchronize products between staging and the online version. The same is the WCMS cockpit where you are engaging with it to handle your web content in a responsive fashion. And if you go into the back office or any of the other cockpits, they are more geared into the look into the transactional data, which is more like autos, OMS, those kind of systems.
Thanks, Ravi. Yeah, with this, we'll end the Q&A session. Thank you everyone for joining our webinar today, and I'm sure you'll have some more questions, and feel free to send us your questions, and we would be more than happy to address them. We'll send the presentation copy of today's webinar by today day end, and you can review it, and if you would like to schedule a deep dive discussion, or if you have any businesses related specific questions, we would be more than happy to address them on a case-to-case basis. Thank you once again, and thanks, Ravi, for your time, and take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.